welcome everyone. Mark Mix here, President of the National Right to Work Committee, and I've got, it's been a privilege to bring Greg Mourad, the Vice President for Federal Legislation, here to talk with you about a little bit about what's going on in Washington. Greg's been running our legislative program at the federal level, been with us for 24 years. Sometimes we send him out to the states to testify in favor of right to work laws and helping us defend right-to-work laws across the country. And Greg's been kind of a utility man, just helping out wherever he's been needed. But right now, Greg, it looks like you're needed in Washington, D.C. We'll get to that in a minute. But first, let's talk about some good news. Just recently, we had a bill introduced in the United States Senate and the United States House that is kind of what our mission statement is. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure, absolutely. The National Right to Work Act was just introduced by Congressman Joe Wilson in the House and Senator Rand Paul in the Senate. It's H.R. 1275 and Senate 406. This is a really simple piece of legislation. It simply says that nobody can be forced to pay dues or fees to a union in order to get or keep a job. And it's a really basic, simple concept that for some reason, certain politicians in Washington seem to object to anyway, and we know why, of course. It's because big labor spends a whole lot of money electing politicians to do their bidding. Nevertheless, it's a really simple piece of legislation and a really simple concept. It just takes the chains of forced unionism off of people and let them decide for themselves whether or not a union deserves their support.
And Greg, you know, sometimes the folks that are watching today and our members, they hear about these 2,300-page bills and 1,800-page bills that are introduced, you know, a couple hours before they're supposed to be voted on, and politicians throw their hands up on both sides of the aisle saying, how dare you do this? Talk about the Right to Work bill in its size.
Sure. Well, the Right to Work bill is really simple. It's a simple one-page bill that doesn't add a single new word to federal law. In fact, all it does is remove a few provisions from the National Labor Relations Act and the Railway Labor Act, specifically striking the provisions that create the forced dues system in the first place. And if we get rid of those, we leave the National Labor Relations Act otherwise intact and simply saying that everybody has the right to be part of a union if they want, and they have the absolute right to not be part of a union if they want that.
Yeah, Greg, that's a really important point. I mean, we're not trying to add additional law. We're just simply saying that the bias in federal law should be in favor of voluntarism as opposed to coercion, and that's what the Right to Work law would be doing. We got the bill introduced, and it has 60 co-sponsors in the House, I think original co-sponsors, and 15 in the Senate, which is a pretty good start. What are our plans for the bill? I mean, you know, when people think about this and say, Mark and Greg, you know, look, Biden's in the White House, you can't win. What's our goal here?
Well, our goal, Mark, would be to give all of the politicians in D.C. the opportunity to show which side they support. Do they stand with the American people, who 80% of whom believe in the concept of right to work, that it's just plain wrong to force people to join a union, or do they want to stand with the union bosses in their attempts to keep American workers in chains? And so we're going to be recruiting co-sponsors for these two pieces of legislation, the House and the Senate versions, over the course of the next year and a half, so that when November of 22 rolls around, everybody will be able to see who is standing with us and with the American people as a co-sponsor of the National Right to Work Act, even if Congresswoman Pelosi and Senator Schumer have no intention of moving those bills. It'll give us a chance to show who's a good guy and who's a bad guy.
Yeah, and the introduction of the bill and the ability to ask people to co-sponsor and support is one way to get accountability, but if we can find a way to get a vote on the bill, that's really what we'd like, when they actually literally have to push the red button or the green button, or they have to say thumbs up or thumbs down, then we can go and have a conversation with the American people about those are for freedom and those are for coercion. Is that right?
Absolutely. Now, votes in the House are really tough to get when you don't have the control of the gavel, but on the Senate side, they can be a lot easier. The amendment process is theoretically more open, and so it should be possible to get us for us to get a roll call vote on the Right to Work bill as an amendment to something else on the Senate floor sometime in the next year and a half.
Yeah, Greg, Majority Leader Steny Hoyer has announced just recently that they're going to bring a bill to the floor of the House of Representatives for consideration and a vote for final passage called the PRO Act, the so-called PRO Act. It's H.R. 842, I believe it is, and we're expecting this bill to come up very quickly. And tell our viewers a little bit about the PRO Act and what it is, and first of all, what it means for us here at Right to Work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this bill is an absolute disaster, Mark. The centerpiece of it, of course, would be the elimination of all 27 existing state right to work laws, and indeed a ban on state right to work laws by gutting Section 14B of the Taft-Hartley Act, which is what allows state right to work laws at all. But the bill goes so much further than that. It's an entire smorgasbord of every bad idea big labor has dredged up over over the last 50 years. It includes the old push-button strike bill that virtually guarantees a union victory in every strike by banning replacement workers even during a purely economic strike. It includes a new version of the old card check idea that would allow the NLRB to impose a union on workers who don't want one via the corrupt card check process rather than even giving them the minimal protection of a secret ballot vote. It includes all kinds of provisions to make sure employers aren't able to even speak to their employees during a union organizing drive so that employees only hear the union's propaganda side of things, thereby greatly increasing the likelihood that they'll end up getting suckered into a union they wouldn't otherwise vote for. It includes a bunch of measures to give the unions a competitive advantage in the marketplace so that it's almost impossible for a non-union shop and its employees to compete for business because of all the ways they're stacking the deck in favor of big labor.
So, Greg, I think you're saying that it's a bad bill.
I am indeed saying that it's a bad bill.
Well, that bill, as I mentioned, is probably going to be on the House floor very shortly, and folks that are looking at it, and we're going to be mobilizing folks to oppose the bill. You need to contact your member of Congress and tell them to vote against H.R. 842, the so-called PRO Act in Congress. We expect that vote to come very soon, so if we can ask, we would love you to be out there talking to your legislator about why they should oppose this bad bill. Obviously, if the repeal of all 27 right-to-work laws is not enough for you, then card check might be, and striker replacement might be, and civil fines for employers who, quote, create unfair labor practice charges or attract unfair labor practice charges. There's so much in this bill to oppose. It's literally a smorgasbord of everything union officials have wanted for the last 50, 60, 70 years. And it's all in one pot, and it's going to be on the floor of the House very soon. So, Greg, thanks for the opportunity to talk with you about these. We'll hopefully have a few more of these sessions where we can talk about what's going on in Washington, and you can give your insight. And certainly we thank our members of the National Right to Work Committee who make all this work possible to not only pass right to work laws in the states, but to defend against this type of intrusion on individual freedom in the workplace. So from the National Right to Work Committee, I'm Mark Mix, and this is the Week in Right to Work. So thanks for tuning in.